السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الذي لا إله سواه الواحد الأحد الصمد الذي لم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد عالم الغيب والشهادة لا يغيب عنه مثقال ذرة في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو اللطيف الخبير. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف وأكرم أنبيائه سيدنا ومولانا محمد الصادق الطاهر الطيب الأمين والرسول المبين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين، وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الصالحين الميامين والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اجعلنا منهم آمين. Before, inshallah ta'ala, we continue where we left off last week, and I will ask one or two of you to hopefully give me a summary. If you had prepared a summary, at least some of you who are more involved in the way you learn. Before I do that, I remind always a spiritual envelope, if you wish, for what we are doing. After Salah, first during Salah and after Salah, now that you finished Salah, Salatul Isha, where are you? Where are you? In the masjid. That's a Zahiri answer. That's an outward answer. And yes, you're right, alhamdulillah, but that's not my question. Where are you? How is your qalb? Where are you in your qalb? Where is your qalb? Where is your heart? Is it? Inshallah, is it? We perform salah, hafizakumullah wa iyana, not simply as urfi exercise, as a habitual custom exercise. And many of us, that's what we do. May Allah forgive us. But we enter into salah in order to forget what's before salah of distractions and to reorient our minds and our hearts and therefore our internal energies, to reorient them towards an awareness of Allah Azza wa Jal. I want every time I perform salah, every time I am in dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal, to re-enter and reorient myself and re-enter into an awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the qalb is at ease, the qalb is open. When I finish salah, if I am in that state, I'm not in a hurry to leave the masjid. I'm not in a hurry to leave this space. I'm not in a hurry to go back to something else, even legitimate, but is not one that keeps me necessarily connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he taught a group of companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa ardahum, he taught them few words of dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal after salah. And he mentioned that they are easy, but not so many are consistent in doing that. Then they asked him, Ya Rasulullah, why is it so? So few words of dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal after salah, to remain in dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal, and yet to mention قَلِيلٌ مَنْ يُحَافِظُ عَلَيْهِنْ. not so many are consistent in doing that. He said, why, Ya Rasulullah? He said, when you finish salah, then shaitan comes back and reminds you of something you have to do. فيأتي الشيطان فيذكره حاجته. Oh, I have to do this. It's important. فيأتي الشيطان فيذكره حاجته. And he says shaitan and حاجته. He didn't say something sinful or something that you need to do. But anything I need to do relative to being with Allah is equal to what? 0. But we have made ourselves accustomed to this type of reasoning. And it became standardized, and it became the acceptable norm and the standard. And we find it even, we think, rational. Where is my qalb after salah? Has salah helped me? When I entered salah, was I really in salah with my qalb, or was simply my body, my external appearance here, but my ruh and my qalb and my aql were in a different dimension somewhere else, to which I am in a hurry to go back right after salah. Do remember, and I remind myself first, my dear brothers and sisters, that salah and dhikr are intended to remind us to stay in connectedness with Allah Azza wa Jal. Dhikr, that's why it is called dhikr, because it reminds. The more I am in dhikr, the more likely I'm going to stay connected to Allah Azza wa Jal. I remember, I don't forget, that I continue to do that. And if we are like that, then other things that Allah may send our way of good things will be very beneficial, and we will receive them well. But if not, then there is a hijab. If not, then there is a veil. And that veil stands against me, my mind, against understanding, against receiving, against accepting, against then executing. May Allah help us all. So let us put this is the envelope in which we're going to put the next things that are, so far as we've been discussing, a little bit about rational and technical juristic issues that hopefully are beneficial, because they are some sort of foundational type of information in our deen. And what was it that we said last time? Who prepared the summary? Thank you. Jazakallah ta'ala. Jazakallah ta'ala. Now, having said that, and that was, of course, I would have asked you, then what is your intake from that? And that's what was mentioned in the sum of Sayyid Muhammad. What is your attitude? What is our attitude? And why are we learning? Why are we talking about these issues as they pertain to each one's experience of the deen in masajid? Nowadays, of course, on the screens of this smart phones, supercomputers actually, called smartphones, etc., the websites, the Googles, etc. What is your attitude when you hear certain texts, when you hear certain opinions? What we are learning is very foundational, very important for that. What you hear anywhere in masajid, or in classes, or in lectures, through the digital medium, or personally, it's very, very important to pay attention, especially for those who want to, at some level of seriousness, learn their deen. And, to learn, if you want to learn to understand what people say in any country, what they say, what they mean, what should we first learn? The language. We should first learn the language, the basics, the grammar of that language, the language. Many Muslims, all Muslims really are interested and they always want to take part in conversations, in discussions about halal and haram, and bid'ah and sunnah, and this, and kufr and iman, and everybody. But of those of us who are like that, how many are very serious in learning the language of the jurists? These foundational principles. If we don't spend time, quality time, learning those, we are simply wasting others' time and our time. And it will not be very, very productive. In that case, we should either recognize where we are instead of entering into also debates and yes and no. Don't do that. And if you want to understand and enter into maybe why, then we have to learn the language. And what we are doing here, this is part of that language. Some foundational aspects of the language of the jurists, rahimahumullah ta'ala. So, and the last thing we were addressing was, as was summarized also, is, by the way, before that, when we mentioned, I repeat again, when we mentioned that text, and we mentioned another text also, which was not mentioned. We started with that other text as well. When these basic rules, what are they teaching us? And these examples we mentioned, the example of Shaddur Rihal, the initiation of a specific journey or voyage or travel to someplace else, except the 3 masajid. This text when we mentioned, and we mentioned what was said about it. And the other text, what we mentioned last time towards the end, which text was it? Besides Umar, who else? Who was here? Who picked it and who took it seriously? Hopefully you will. So nobody took it seriously, so we forgot. So we're not interested in learning. Please forgive me, Alamullah. It's wonderful that you are here, but we ought to be here with quality. Not just be here. Not just like be in salah, or my body is in salah. Allah is in no need for that. My qalb has to be in salah. If I sit in a majlis of ilm, I should not just sit. May Allah reward you. Inshallah, even that is rewarding. Bi-idhnillah, as the text teaches. هم الجلساء لا يشقى بهم جليسهم. Inshallah ta'ala. But I should sit with quality of paying attention, of learning. This is sacred knowledge. This is knowledge that is more important than other good aspects of knowledge. That we learn and we spend quality time learning. So, what was the other text? Yes, I guess there is only one person. أين من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. Who visits my grave has earned my shafa'a, my intercession, said he sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Well, we said, why did we mention these texts in the context of the language of the jurists that we were introducing? Who remembers? Why these examples? As case studies of what issue? Besides, let's see, others. 1, 2, 3. Besides those 3 there. Because I know them. Yes.
When there's an issue of people invoking other individuals for discussion.
Yes, that's the subject matter. That's the subject matter, the content of those hadith. Why did we mention that type of hadith in the context of, as I said, remember, the sources of knowledge? Continue. Okay. Okay. All right. That's good. That relates to what we were talking about. In which way? Can you say a little more? Remember, I emphasized it, twice. Past week, the week before, when we started. The issue when we say Quran and Sunnah, the issue is not only Quran and Sunnah. We resolve that by saying, well, it's not only Quran and Sunnah. Quran and Sunnah are, alhamdulillah, the primary sources of our knowledge. But even with that, the issue is not that in this case. The issue is, that was resolved by saying there are other sources of knowledge, and you mentioned them. Ijma', Qiyas, Istihsan, Sibt al-Dhara'i', Salih Mursala, etc. And we mentioned those. But also, when there is from Quran or from Sunnah, and all agree that it is in the Quran or it is in the Sunnah, there is still an issue. You're saying Quran and Sunnah, but the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean? And that's we gave the example of Shadd al-Rihal. Shadd al-Rihal is an authentic text. It's in Bukhari. But what does it mean? And here, Al-Shaykh gave an example. The great expert scholar, rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, who lived up to the early 8th century Hijri, died in 728 Hijri, in the Hijri Islamic calendar, which is like something like the 13th, 14th century Gregorian. He understood from it that we talked about it. But we said the expert scholars all before him, up to that point, greater than him, some like him, some in his time also less than him, and after him, the vast majority after him, before him, probably all of them, after him, most of them did not understand it that way. And that's what we explained, and we mentioned at least 3 ways of understanding that the scholars have proposed, some of which you would also understand. So that's why we mentioned that text. First of all, there is Quran and Sunnah. If you say it's only Quran and Sunnah, no. The answer is there are other sources of knowledge. Now let's assume it is in the Quran and it is in the Sunnah. Then sometimes is what you understand, what an expert scholar understood, is not necessarily the one that other expert scholars have understood. And in this case, we have 1 versus hundreds. Even if you have 10 versus thousands, statistically speaking, when it comes to expert opinions, the expert opinions of a large number of experts weigh more even in a court of law than the expert opinions of much smaller number. So that's why we gave that example. Very famous case on a famous issue. And we said many people nowadays, young people and people who learn from only one source or one way or one method, know only what, for example, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala has said, and those who follow him. And are absolutely in the dark about the understanding of the other numerous expert scholars who understood it differently. And then the second example, من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. That's we mentioned as a case. Now there is a text also, but the text you are bringing maybe considered by an expert scholar in the field as weak. Weak, ضعيف. Yet another expert scholar who uses the same methodologies finds it actually not weak, strong, in the sense of textual criticism. And this is an example. من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. For example, in this text, the likes of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah up to that's like 6th and 7th centuries. After that, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah says this text is weak. Nay, even maybe mawdu'a, spurious. And yet, the other expert scholars say, no, with all due respect, you are wrong. It is not weak. And these are the reasons, the rational reasons, which we're not entering into at this point, that text is not weak. Number one, that specific text. Some ulama have said it is Hasan, and some said it is Sahih, in the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, and before him, and after him. I have looked at that very critically. And why? But then even the next point, and that was mentioned in the first summary, even if it were weak, even if a text is weak, number one, the expert scholars don't stop there. They look in all the texts available in that matter. And even if they find no authoritative, strong text, but find weak texts, are you with me? They find weak texts. Each one is in its chain of reporting, is in its sanad, is a different one. And all of them are weak. This, in the logic of textual criticism, this, in accordance to the expert jurists and the expert rational thinkers in the field of hadith, this makes the content of that weak text, it makes it strong. Because you in this case, you add probabilities, in a sense. The probability becomes bigger and greater than the first one. So that text becomes authoritative. And that's what scholars answered him in his time and afterwards, even some of his great mind students, like Imam Zahabi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who is another encyclopedic, hafiz, faqih, historian, etc., rahimahullah ta'ala. And he said, actually, with all scholarly fairness, this text and all the texts in this matter, together, they make it authoritative. Even if you considered that text as weak. So, and therefore to say, oh, man zara qabri wajabat lahu shafa'ati is useless. And therefore, the idea of going to visit the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to visit it with the intent of having, insha'Allah ta'ala, rewards such as shafa', it's ma'siyah, they say, those who follow that opinion. The answer is, logically first, no, the text is actually authoritative by itself, in accordance to many expert scholars, and by the integration of all the other texts in the same issue, and the meaning becomes strong and authoritative. And that's the overwhelming great majority of ulama. Up to the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, you could say all of them. From the time of Ibn Taymiyyah on, you could easily say the vast majority of them. So the issue is not only the primary source, but even with the primary source, alhamdulillah, there are these challenges. And no expert scholar, as we said, disregards what? No expert scholar, I'm sorry, you're right. No expert scholar disregards something else I had in mind. Disregards the Quran and the Sunnah. To say, well, where is it in the Quran and the Sunnah? Well, if we're talking about the expert scholar saying what the hukm is, there is no expert scholar called expert scholar, i.e. mujtahid, who does not first scan critically the Quran and the Sunnah and all other sources of knowledge of Sharia, ijma', qiyas, etc. With all of that together and all the technicalities in between that are years and years of arduous, beautiful intellectual studies, after that he says, well, this is halal, or this is mubah, or this is makruh, or this is mustahab, or this is haram, or this is wajib, obligatory, in my scholarly opinion. No scholar, expert, worth any such a name, would begin to argue on any issue without Quran and Sunnah. Perhaps people say that because nowadays people amongst us are called scholars and don't know the Quran. They don't memorize the Quran. They don't have the easy availability of the Quran in their memory to scan the issue. And then he says, ayah this, ayah this, ayah this, ayah that. And there are those who with that, they know the hadith by the tens of thousands and they can scan them also on an issue and then mention this hadith. And then they use other technical, rational processes to take those ayat of the Quran and those hadith of Rasulullah and analyze them rationally and then give you an answer. Because nowadays we don't even have proper hafiz of Quran as people who are in the forward march to give expert opinions. While maybe they have studied here and there, but they don't know the Quran. لا يحفظون القرآن ولا يفهمون القرآن ولا يفقهون القرآن إلا قليلا. One cannot do that unless one who goes and reads and finds out, alhamdulillah, the opinions of the scholars and says, well, on this issue, this is what these scholars, experts say. Well, alhamdulillah, that's fair. But to go beyond that and to say this is right and this is wrong, and this is the way you should understand the text when one is not in any way close to a student of an expert scholar, that is dangerous. So we were giving those examples in this context. Second, hadith weak, also part of the language of the jurists, is when hadith is weak, in addition to what we said, it is not rejected in totality. It is not. Now it is the fashion in the last probably 50 or so years, developing this fashion amongst some students of ilm who have learned from one source, basically, one source with different branches, that a weak hadith is useless. It's just like if it were also spurious, fabricated, mawdu'a text. And the answer is absolutely not. When we look at our repertoire of hadith sciences and fiqh sciences and jurists, scholarships, we find the contrary. A weak text is not rejected because it's weak in the absolute sense. Rejected. And I will give you examples, and we mentioned something before, and it was mentioned clearly and succinctly in the summary, first one. So, how is that? Just keep in mind that there are nowadays in masajid, in institutions, in places, in books you read, depends what you read, and you will find hadith da'if, da'if jiddan, very weak in other words, and disregarded. It's not used as authority in anything. And then what do you use instead? In this case, those who do that, what do they use instead? Paying attention. May Allah bless you for participating, but listen carefully to what I say. What's the answer in this case? A person who says, what was I saying? Yeah. Disregard it. Hadith da'if, throw it. As long as it is not fabricated. Then when it is da'if and you're saying, reject it, throw it away, what's your alternative? What do you think their alternative is, those who follow that opinion? Huh? What type of ijtihad? I'm sorry? Say that again? Okay. Their own reasoning, right? When you say own reasoning, what do you mean by that? I just want to make sure. Well, there is in this case, okay, khalas, yes. In this case, it's a matter in which there is hadith, but the hadith is da'if. There is no other hadith that is stronger. Of course, if there is a hadith that is stronger, that's clearly, stronger takes precedence over a weaker in terms of the rational logic in it. Khalas. Now, there isn't. That's when they say reject hadith da'if. When there isn't at all. So what do? When you reject it, it means your own opinion. Your own pure, in inverted commas, pure analysis. I don't want to call it rational necessarily. That's what it means. Instead of that. Khalas, when there is no text, usually they say, well, Quran and Sunnah. Well, here is Sunnah, but it is da'if. No? Then what's the recourse? What's the recourse? It's not Sunnah, because it's rejected totally. And it's not in the Quran, and it's not in another hadith that is stronger and authentic, the same meaning, or the opposite of it. Then what do? In other words, you don't take Sunnah. While they emphasize Sunnah. In this case, you don't take Sunnah. Because it is weak. Number one. That itself, I think, is a flawed reasoning, if you follow me. To say we have to follow the Sunnah, but then on an issue there is no what you call authoritative, strong Sunnah. There is another Sunnah which is called weak, and then you say, reject the Sunnah. Isn't it flawed? It sounds to me a little bit of a contradiction. However, because it is weak, they would argue, well, it is weak. We cannot confirm it is Sunnah. That's true. But weak does not mean it is not Sunnah. Nor does it mean it is confirmed Sunnah. It is neither confirmed nor rejected, nor disproven. It's neither proven as Sunnah nor disproven as Sunnah. Especially that in the weak text there are levels of weaknesses. There are levels of weaknesses. Now assume a text is weak, but a very mild weakness. That text as they call it, يعني يكتب الحديث ويعتبر به إلى غير ذلك. That's a text that is weak, but mild weakness. That means there is as much probability that it is from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and as much that it is not. We do not know. To reject it, you might have rejected a sunnah. You don't know. Now, with this in mind, the expert scholars of old have said, you do not reject it. You use it. If there is no other text strong, and if there is no other text in the Quran or in the Sunnah that opposes the meaning carried in that weak text, if there isn't, then it takes precedence over your own analogical reasoning. It is stronger than analogical reasoning. It is stronger than qiyas. And the expert scholars have almost all of them of old used that. You hear sometimes, or you may read, that al-hadith al-da'if la yu'malu bihi fi al-ahkam. This is a statement that the scholars know what they mean by it, and they don't mean by it what most understand from it. They don't mean reject it, and it is not used at all in matters of halal and haram at all. That's not true. They have conditions for that. And they all have used the weak texts in ahkam, not only in fada'il al-a'mal. Now, what's the difference between ahkam and fada'il al-a'mal? Who can tell me? Yes, please. Okay. That's not good enough. But thank you for the trying. Yes. That's better. That's better as an explanation. Who else? Okay. Ahkam versus fada'il al-a'mal. Fada'il al-a'mal are usually pertaining to matters of the good things to do that are known in general in the Quran and in general in the Sunnah to be meritorious, to be virtuous, to be good to do. Like speaking the truth, like helping the needy and the poor, like being in dhikr of Allah, like praying, like fasting, like reading Quran, like forgiving. Fada'il a'mal. Fada'il a'mal. Nawafil, extra acts of good worship, that the Shara in general in the Quran and the Sunnah approves of. And then you have specifics in those matters. These are fada'ilul amal. Like to say this dhikr and that dhikr, this dua and that dua under this occasion, etc. This behavior, moral behavior and ethical behavior that is clear and strong in the overall general texts. But specifically they come in these weak, if they come in these weak texts, then we take weak texts in fada'il al-amal. But ahkam is, for example, buying and selling. And there is a specific transaction of some kind. Is it lawful or not lawful? At all. This is a matter of ahkam. when I'm performing salah and something happened in salah to me, something. Let's say I laughed in salah. Oh, what's the ruling of this? Is my salah nullified or is it still valid? This is a matter of hukum. Oh, somebody is going to inherit from somebody else. In this case, is this inheritance legal or not? This is hukum. This is a matter of ahkam, plural of hukum, i.e. legal injunctions. Oh, I'm doing some business with you. Is this a ribawi transaction or not? This is hukum. وهكذا. These are ahkam. The rule is that you usually hear the weak hadith is inoperative when it comes to ahkam. This statement is written, is available, but usually, as the expert scholars tell us, and they explain, it is not what you think it is. It is not taken على إطلاقه, in the absolute sense, أن الحديث الضعيف لا يعمل به في الأحكام كما قال الشيخ الإمام الحافظ المجتهد الإمام أحمد رحمه الله تعالى أحمد الغماري, that هذا قول العلماء الحديث الضعيف لا يعمل به في الأحكام قولا ليس على إطلاقه، بل كل الأئمة عملوا في الأحكام بالحديث الضعيف. He says رحمه الله تعالى, and of course I mentioned him because he was حافظ and faqih, etc. And this statement was said before, and I quoted to you the statement of Imam النووي رحمه الله تعالى as a representative of the حفاظ فقهاء, as an example of those who are not only حفاظ of hadith, in hadith criticism and hadith collection, but he was also a jurist رحمه الله تعالى, who says basically the same thing. Now, if you hear in the discussions that, oh, this is da'if rejected, or very da'if rejected, there's no bearing, you will encounter it a lot nowadays. Because of a certain way and certain one source of information that is available, and it is free to be available, and it is respected. But upon further investigation, that is only an opinion amongst the opinions of the grandest of minds and the most transparent of souls who have said, no, al-hadith al-da'if is operative. As long as there is no strong hadith in that matter, number one, or as long as there is no strong hadith in opposition to the meaning that weak hadith carries, for instance. Then the only available is weak hadith. You take it as long as it is not so weak that it is spurious, mawdu'. Remember that. And who says things like that? And who practice things like that? Basically, almost, as far as I know, and I studied from the words of the ulama, almost all the expert ulama. I give you examples for the next 10 minutes that we have. Ready for some examples? Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. Number one. Did he use weak hadith? You bet he did. And the texts are available, and I'm simply reporting to you what's in the texts available for the serious students of ilm to check. Very famous case in the fiqh, in the Hanafi jurisprudence. When you are in salah, and I mentioned it earlier as a suggestion, if you laugh, you qahqih, you ha ha in salah, that salah is not only that, but what does Imam Abu Hanifa say? Who knows? You need to renew your wudu. Your wudu is invalidated. Your wudu is invalidated if you laugh in salah. Not only that's wrong to do, of course, but even your wudu, your ablution is nullified. It's well established in the Hanafi madhab and in the teaching of the Imam, especially Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala. Why is that? In accordance to qiyas, to reasoning by analogy and rationality, it doesn't pass the test of qiyas. Right? Well, nothing came from my body. Didn't pass gas, didn't urinate, didn't defecate. Nothing of the sort that we know in the Shara that would nullify wudu. No thing came from me as a najasa or as an impurity or so. It's qahqah. But why does he do that? Because there is a text. And that text is in accordance to almost, the experts say, almost all the critiques of textual criticism, that text is da'if. But he, rahimahullah ta'ala, this text is da'if. And he was a very rational scholar, actually. He was very, very, very intelligent. The ulama say, when Imam Abu Hanifa argues, and there is a text, and he argues, he has beautiful ways of making things make sense and connect in logical ways and in rational ways and so on. But he, in this case, because there is no other text in the matter, and there is no other text opposing it, and there is this text, he would be as a very brilliant mind but also transparent soul. He would not dare take the risk of saying that he rejected the word of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Because there is, probabilistically speaking, it is still possible that it was said by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Hadith da'if, that's what it means. It doesn't mean we're sure it was not said. Maybe. But also, remember the other maybe is the glass half full or half empty. You know, some prefer to say half empty, but some who are positive would say half full. And it's a different attitude and a different psychology to approach a meaning. And so he takes that. And many other issues. Al-wudu'u bi nabidh al-tamr عند أبي حنيفة رحمه الله تعالى. Al-wudu'u bi nabidh al-tamr. It doesn't happen nowadays, so it's obsolete. But in those days, it makes a lot of sense. For wudu, the only liquid available that you have would be, like for example, nabidh al-tamr. You know, when you put dates in those days, and they put them in water to let some taste come, sweet taste come. And he said you can perform wudu with the nabidh of tamr. Arguably, it's not necessarily strong. But why did he do that? There is a weak text about that. And these are issues of ahkam, not fada'il al-a'mal. And he did that, radiallahu ta'ala anhu wa arwah. And we're talking about the precedents, the legal, juristic precedents of the grand, rational masters and the grand, beautiful souls. Imam Shafi'i, he did a lot of that also, rahimahullah ta'ala. It's well established that under the same conditions and even more, he uses weak texts. Example, when you go to Hajj or to Umrah, do you see some people praying inside any time, even after Asr, Nafila? And Tahiyyatul Masjid and the 2 rakat of Tawaf, even if it is after Asr, and Nafila after Asr. Most likely they are Shafi'is. Why? For Imam Shafi'i, you can perform nafila in Mecca, even at all time, 24 hours a day. Even after Subh and even after Asr and so on. And you know there is a text that says that we shouldn't do that after Asr and after Subh when we pray. But in Mecca he says you can do that. Why? There is a weak text, a text that is considered by expert critics as weak text. Salatu al-nafilati fi Mecca fi kulli al-awqat. And there is a hadith da'if about that, and he takes it. And other texts. Imam Ahmad is even, Imam Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is well established of also making it very clear that he does explicitly say he takes and applies the weak texts in the sense of technically defined as weak texts, even in ahkam with those conditions that we mentioned. And there are tons of examples. One time, one of the scholars, his scholar says to him, Ya Imam, this text, you use it? And he mentions the text. الناس أكفاء الناس كلهم أكفاء إلا الحجام والحائك للحائك والحجام والكساح, etc. He says to him, the text كل الناس أكفاء, you use it? It's operative with you? He said, yes it is. He said, but the scholar, the student who is learning, and the sheikh, the real scholar, student, so he said, but you have identified this text as weak on this basis and that basis. Imam Ahmad answers, and this is of course all in the books, sources, proper sources. Imam Ahmad answers, when he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, نعم ضعفنا إسناده ولكن العمل عليه. He said, yes, the isnad of it textually spoken, in textual criticism language, the isnad of it, the chain of narration of it is weak, but al-amalu alayh. But the ulama have always applied it, practiced it. The sanad is weak, but the content is operative. The scholars, meaning in his time, up to his time, before, they practiced the meaning of this text. And more than once, he said that, rahimahullah ta'ala. But you, in this chain of narration, you identified this reporter as weak. He said, yes, it is weak in the sanad, but again he repeats, but the content is practiced by the scholars. And I practice that content. Because he's mentioning that the fact that a text is technically weak does not necessarily mean that actually it is inoperative, that Rasulullah ﷺ did not utter it. And there are other indicators to the scholars that would say, that would make them argue that despite the technical weakness in this case, the text is operative. Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Malik, I don't have to say all of them, trust me. Imam Sheikh Ahmad al-Hafiz al-Siddiq says, not only the Maliki scholars have used in ahkam the hadith da'if, the weak hadith, but all of the ai have, he said, unquote. So the Malikis also, Imam Malik is well known to use al-balaghat, wal-marasil, wal-munqati'at, rahimahullah ta'ala, as sources of law. In the absence of, again, stronger texts, and in the absence of strong texts that teach the opposite, even in ahkam. Imam al-Bukhari relates in his Sahih, ta'liqan. Those of you who know The jargon and التعليق, الحديث معلق, is one of the forms of ضعيف hadith, of weak hadith. And he mentioned that in the context of leaving a will. And in the Quran Allah says, as he speaks of the laws of inheritance, he says, من بعد وصية يوصى بها أو دين. After leaving a will or a debt. When those are taken care of, in other words, the rest of the estate is distributed amongst the heirs. And in here, the first was mentioned, first mentioned was wasiyah and then dain. Wasiyah first, will first, and then the debt. And then Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu ardah, he says, you read this and you take and you use in the priority sense, in your way of distributing inheritance, you are using wasiyah before dain. But I have witnessed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prioritizing dain before wasiyah. Paying the debt first, then the will that is left, then distributing the rest. Now this text that is from the chain of narration goes back to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, that in the distribution of the estate, first you start by paying the debts first. Then the wasiyah, then you distribute the rest. He said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that. This text is, in accordance to the technical analysis of the scholars, is weak, ضعيف, لأن فيه الحارث الأعور, that they consider weak, some of them. But Al-Bukhari says, as Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani relates, Al-Bukhari says, At-Tirmidhi says, who is a student of Al-Bukhari, he says that, student and a colleague of Al-Bukhari, he says, Al-Amalu alayhi inda ahli al-ilm. However, the expert scholars use this text in practice, in actuality. And Ibn Hajar argues, why did then Al-Bukhari mention a weak text as a hujjah? Now, this is ihtijaj, not isti'nas. He mentioned this text as an evidence in this hukm pertaining to inheritance. And he says his habit is not to do that, is not to present a weak text as evidence. But here he did, because most likely he has also known, like his student and companion Imam al-Tirmidhi, that up to that point, this content of this weak text was acted upon up to that time. Does it make sense to you? Keep thinking about it. There are tons of examples. Famous text or a famous case that many of you know. What is the nisab of gold? We did many times, at least twice here since I've been here, 2 seminars on zakah. What is the nisab of zakah, of gold? What is the nisab, meaning the minimum that you possess for your gold to be zakatable, which you have to give in mandatory charity. Pardon me? Pardon me? 85 grams. 85 grams about. But what does that come from? Do you know? We talked about where does it come from? A text in which the nisab is mentioned at, if you own 20 dinars, as in 20 golden coins in those days, which nowadays are estimated to be about 85 grams of gold. That text which teaches the nisab of gold, do you know what? In accordance with the expert scholars, and here Al-Hafiz ibn Abd al-Barr mentions that this text is agreed upon to be weak. ولكن العمل عليه عند أهل العلم. But the expert thinkers and scholars have always acted upon the content of this text. Yet it is, technically speaking, weak. It's not any week it is accepted. But in ahkam, under these conditions that we mentioned, and here are examples and many other texts from the greatest of experts. We have examples from Abu Hatim al-Razi, the grand, old, early critique of hadith and faqih, rahimahullah ta'ala. We have that. We have Ibn Khuzaymah, rahimahullah ta'ala, saying and giving examples. Ibn Hibban, all of them. They have not rejected the hadith al-da'if in totality. They are smarter than that. And they are more Allah-fearing than that. Imagine you have 1,000 or 10,000, technically speaking, weak hadith, and you reject all of them. Do you know what that means? If you have, that's why I started with the spiritual envelope. If you have that spiritual envelope, how dare you? Isn't there a consciousness? My God. How much probability is there in 10,000 hadith of weak hadith, which means close to being authentic sometimes? What's the probability that hundreds of those are authentic? It's really serious. And because of my choice of simply to reject in totality, it's very, very, very dangerous. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So these are some other examples for why when you hear or read weak hadith, we don't have to follow fashions. Fashions come and go. Fashions come and go. Fashions come and go. Don't be one of fashions. Be one of principles. And there is enough in our constant principles to teach us also when we can be accommodating, compromising. But don't take an entire rule and make it an axiom. Reject everything that is da'if. Rationally wrong, and the experts of old, rahimahullah ta'ala, have not done that. This also does not mean that now take any weak text and use it any time. That's not either right. We said these are the conditions in which these expert scholars use. I said, then you say, how do I know? Well, you don't have to know. You're not an expert scholar. You don't have to know. You don't do that. You know, when you have a critical issue in medicine, let's say in oncology, you know, the medicine of cancer, you don't say, you know, I need to know so that I do things. No, you don't do things. You don't even need to know because you might not understand. And even when you know, there's nothing you can do. Because you're not an expert and you're not in that field. But this, why is it good for us? Because we read, because we hear, because it has become a fashion when da'if rejected. And it is, for those of you who read ilm, you will find this nowadays a lot. Especially if you read certain books from certain publishers, etc. But take it as an opportunity to learn. Oh, these are other views, and this is how they reason, and maybe this is what they missed in their reasoning. So, Ya Allah, help me if I ever become a true student of knowledge, in the path of becoming a scholar, in the path, if at all ever, to become an expert scholar, help me never fall into this attitude and this trap. May Allah help us all. May Allah guard us all. May Allah show us the path of rational knowledge in the envelope of the spiritual dimension and reality. May we never escape the spiritual requirements while we are dealing with the rational requirements. Ever. Because our deen is the balance between the two. As our human Nature is a balance between the two. We are both intellectual, mental, and spiritual. We are physical and spiritual. And the balance is needed. In our Sharia, there is that balance. Just the balance, like there is a balance in our nature as human being between, I repeat, the material, the rational, and the spiritual. So in Sharia, there is that as well. A beautiful balance between issues pertaining to material and rational issues and issues pertaining to spiritual dimensions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us always see that, preserve that, and promote that. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Please don't forget summaries. You don't have to, but it's good if at least some of you do. And if you become more and more interested, then take notes and summarize for yourselves and for all of us to benefit. Again, may Allah bless you and reward you. Assalamu alaikum.